At 0200 on January 23, 1945, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Fluckey stood on the bridge of USS Barb, watching the black waters of Nam Quan Harbor through his binoculars. 32 years old, 3 war patrols, 0 mistakes allowed. The harbor was 15 miles inland from the open sea, shallow water everywhere. Uncharted mines floating in the darkness, Japanese coastal batteries covering every approach. And Fluckey was taking his submarine straight into the middle of it. USS Barb was a Gato-class fleet submarine, 311 feet long, 1,526 tons surface displacement, 2,424 tons submerged. 4 General Motors. Cleveland 16278, a diesel engines producing 5,400 horsepower combined. Maximum surface speed 20.25 knots. Submerged speed 8.75 knots on electric motors. Test depth rated at 300 feet, though experienced commanders knew the boats could go deeper. 6 bow torpedo tubes, 4 stern tubes. She carried 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes, silent, wakeless, deadly. The Mark 18 had been developed specifically to address the catastrophic failures of the earlier Mark 14. Electric propulsion meant no exhaust wake, no telltale bubble trail leading back to the firing position. The weapon ran at 29 knots with a range of 4,000 yards. Each torpedo carried 575 pounds of Torpex explosive compound. Detonation pressure exceeded conventional TNT by 50%. One hit could break a cargo ship's keel. The crew numbered 80 men, 60 enlisted, 20 officers and petty officers. They had sailed from Pearl Harbor on December 19, 1944, heading for the patrol area off the China coast. This was Barb's 11th war patrol. Fluckey had taken command in April 1944 after the previous skipper had been relieved for lack of aggressiveness. The Navy wanted results. Fluckey delivered. In 8 months, Barb had sunk 17 Japanese ships, totaling 79,000 tons. Merchant vessels, transports, tankers. Every ship meant supplies that would never reach Japanese forces. Every ship meant troops that would starve. Every ship meant the war ending sooner. But those previous attacks had been conventional. Open water intercepts. Deep ocean where a submarine could dive if things went wrong. Periscope attacks from safe positions. Fluckey had followed doctrine on his first few patrols. Identified targets. Calculated firing solutions. Fired torpedoes. Dove deep to avoid escorts. The tactics worked. The ships sank. But Fluckey saw limitations. Japanese convoys had adapted. They traveled close to shore. They hugged coastlines where water was too shallow for submarines to operate. They anchored in harbors protected by mines and coastal guns. The easy targets were gone. What remained required innovation. Nam Quan Harbor was different. The water depth averaged 60 feet. Barb drew 17 feet at the keel. That left 43 feet clearance, not enough to dive safely, not enough to maneuver if Japanese destroyers showed up. The submarine would be trapped on the surface in restricted waters with nowhere to run. Every officer aboard thought Fluckey had lost his mind. The navigator said the charts were unreliable. The executive officer said the approach was suicide. The diving officer said if they had to crash dive, they would hit bottom and stay there. Fluckey listened to every objection, then issued the orders anyway. Barb would enter Nam Quan Harbor on the surface at night, penetrate to the anchorage area, 15 miles inland, attack anchored Japanese shipping, and escape through the same narrow channel before dawn. The plan was insane. That was why it would work. The Japanese believed no submarine commander would be reckless enough to attempt a surface attack inside a defended harbor. They were wrong. Intelligence reports indicated Nam Quan Harbor held significant targets. Merchant ships, possibly warships, all anchored in supposedly safe waters far from American submarine patrol areas. The intelligence came from multiple sources. Coast watchers operating behind Japanese lines, Chinese resistance fighters who monitored ship movements, aerial reconnaissance photographs taken by B-29 bombers flying high-altitude missions over China. The photographs showed at least 6 large vessels anchored in the inner harbor. Ship types were difficult to identify from 30,000 feet, but the tonnage was obvious. These were ocean-going merchantmen, not coastal luggers. The ships were unloading supplies for Japanese forces fighting in China. The China theater consumed enormous resources: ammunition for ongoing ground combat, fuel for vehicles and aircraft, food for hundreds of thousands of troops, medical supplies, replacement equipment. All of it had to come by sea. Japanese rail lines in China were under constant attack by American aircraft and Chinese guerrillas. That made sea transport critical. Ships could carry more cargo than trains. Ships could reach coastal ports that railroads could not access. Destroying those ships would cut supply lines and strand Japanese forces in the field. But getting to those ships meant navigating 15 miles of water the submarine charts barely covered. The charts had been drawn by British surveyors in 1898. 47 years old. Hydrographic conditions change over decades. Channels silt up. Sandbars shift, wrecks create new obstacles. The Japanese had added their own modifications: mines scattered in defensive patterns, anti-submarine nets stretched across narrow passages, concrete block obstacles sunk in approach channels. None of this appeared on Barb's charts. Fluckey would be navigating blind through a minefield using maps older than most of his crew. The entrance to Nam Quan Harbor was marked by 2 headlands. The channel between them was less than 2 miles wide. Japanese lookout posts on both sides. Searchlights, coastal defense guns, probably patrol boats. Once Barb entered that channel, there would be no turning back. The tide was critical. High tide gave maximum water depth. Low tide meant running aground on unmarked shoals. Fluckey had calculated the tides using every available resource. The attack had to happen during the incoming tide. Maximum depth, maximum safety margin. Except there was no safety margin. Not really. If you want to see how Fluckey threaded his submarine through 15 miles of mined harbor in total darkness, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories of submarine warfare. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Fluckey. Barb approached the harbor entrance at 0145, speed 10 knots, all 4 diesels running smoothly. The night was moonless. Heavy overcast blocked the stars. Perfect conditions for a surface approach. The Japanese lookouts would see nothing until Barb was inside. The forward lookout spotted the headlands at 0152. Dark shapes against slightly darker sky. No lights visible, no patrol boats. The channel opened before them like a throat waiting to swallow the submarine whole. Fluckey gave the order. All ahead, 1/3. Barb's speed dropped to 6 knots, slow enough to maneuver, fast enough to maintain steerage. The submarine entered the channel at 0158, Japanese territory now. No friendly forces within 300 miles. The crew went to battle stations, silently. No talking. No unnecessary movement. Every man knew that noise carried across water. One dropped wrench, one slammed hatch, one careless shout could alert the Japanese. The diving officer stood ready at his station. If searchlights found them, if coastal guns opened fire, the order would be crash dive. Except crash diving would kill them. The water was too shallow. The submarine would hit bottom at 40 feet. The pressure hull would crack. Water would flood the boat. They would all drown in darkness while Japanese guns hammered the crippled submarine. Fluckey knew this. Every man aboard knew this. They entered the channel anyway. The navigator tracked their position using dead reckoning and visual fixes on the headlands. No radar. Radar emissions would alert Japanese detection equipment. No sonar. Active sonar pings would announce. Barb's presence to every ship in the harbor. Just eyes, compass, and the navigator's best guess. The channel narrowed to 1 mile at 0205. Fluckey could see both shores now. Dark coastline. Hills rising beyond. No lights anywhere. The Japanese were maintaining blackout discipline. Smart. American aircraft had been hitting Chinese ports for weeks. But blackout discipline worked both ways. If the Japanese couldn't see, they couldn't shoot. Barb pushed deeper into the harbor, 5 miles inland at 0218. The water depth held steady at 65 feet. Better than expected. The charts had shown 60 feet. Maybe the tide was higher than predicted. Maybe the charts were wrong. Either way, 65 feet was survivable. Barely. The torpedo crew was ready. All 6 bow tubes loaded. Mark 18 electric torpedoes. No steam exhaust. No visible wake. The Japanese wouldn't see them coming. Each torpedo weighed 3,154 pounds. Each carried a 575-pound Torpex warhead. Detonation velocity 8,000 meters per second. 1 hit would sink a merchant ship. 2 hits would break a transport in half. At 0225, the forward lookout spotted masts. Multiple ships, anchored in the harbor's inner basin, range approximately 4 miles. Fluckey raised his binoculars. He counted 6 ships, maybe 7. Too dark to identify types. But they were big. Tall masts, wide beams. These were not small coastal vessels. These were ocean-going merchantmen, exactly what intelligence had promised. Barb crept closer. Speed reduced to 4 knots. The submarine's bow wave was minimal, just a faint white line in the black water. The anchored ships grew larger. At 2 miles, Fluckey could make out details. 2 large cargo ships, 3 medium transports, 1 ship that looked like a tanker, and 1 massive vessel that might be an ammunition ship. The ammunition ship became the primary target. If Barb could sink an ammunition ship, the explosion would damage or destroy nearby vessels. 1 torpedo, multiple kills. Fluckey ordered the submarine to close to 1,200 yards. The Japanese ships were anchored in 2 rows. The ammunition ship was in the rear row. That meant shooting between the anchored vessels in the front row, threading torpedoes through gaps in the anchored ships. If the range calculation was wrong, if the torpedo track was off by 10 yards, the Mark 18 would hit the wrong ship. Worse, it might not detonate. Torpedo failures had plagued American submarines since 1941. The Mark 14 had been a disaster. Magnetic exploders that didn't work. Contact exploders that broke on impact. Torpedoes that ran too deep. The Mark 18 electric torpedo was better, but not perfect. Fluckey had learned to trust nothing. He aimed for the ammunition ship's center mass. Largest target, highest probability of hit. At 0230, Barb reached her firing position. Range 1,200 yards. Speed 0. The submarine sat motionless on the dark water. The crew held their breath. This was the moment everything depended on. 6 torpedoes. 6 chances to hit targets that would justify risking 80 lives. The torpedo data computer had been calculating the firing solution for 10 minutes. The TDC was an electromechanical analog computer mounted in the conning tower. It took inputs from the periscope bearings, target range, target speed, target course, submarine speed, submarine course. The machine processed all variables and output the correct gyro angle for each torpedo. The gyro angle determined which direction the torpedo would turn after leaving the tube. Get the angle wrong and the torpedo would miss by hundreds of yards. But the TDC relied on accurate target data. Fluckey had estimated the target speed at 0 knots. The ships were anchored. That simplified the calculation. But range estimation in darkness was difficult. The statometer rangefinder required visible target masts. In moonless conditions, Fluckey was relying on visual estimation. If his range estimate was off by 10%, the torpedoes might pass ahead or astern of the target. The ammunition ship sat motionless 1,200 yards away. Fluckey could see her silhouette clearly now. The vessel was approximately 400 feet long. beam roughly 60 feet. Those dimensions suggested a cargo capacity of 8,000 to 10,000 tons. A ship that size carrying ammunition would hold enough explosives to destroy everything within 500 yards if the entire cargo detonated simultaneously. Fluckey gave the order. Fire 1. The torpedo firing panel operator pressed the firing key. Compressed air ejected the first Mark 18 electric torpedo from Tube 1. The submarine shuddered slightly. The torpedo's electric motor engaged immediately upon leaving the tube. No compressed air bubble to mark the launch. No visible wake to give away the firing position. The Mark 18 accelerated to 29 knots using its battery-powered electric motor. The weapon carried 420 battery cells, providing 1,850 amp-hours of capacity. Range at 29 knots was 4,000 yards. At 1,200 yards, the torpedo would reach the target in 72 seconds with battery capacity to spare. The torpedo ran straight for 50 yards. Then the gyro mechanism activated. The weapon turned 8 degrees to port, tracking toward the target's predicted position. The depth setting was 10 feet. The Mach 18 would run just beneath the surface until the magnetic influence exploder detected the target's metal hull. Then, detonation. Fire 2. The second torpedo followed 10 seconds later. Spread pattern. If the first torpedo missed ahead of the target, the second would compensate by aiming slightly astern. Fire 3. Fire 4. Fire 5. Fire 6. All 6 bow tubes emptied in 50 seconds, 6 torpedoes racing toward the anchored ships. Each torpedo carried enough explosive to sink a destroyer. Against an unarmored cargo ship, the damage would be catastrophic. Track time, 72 seconds for the first weapon. Fluckey watched through his binoculars. The seconds stretched. Nothing happened. Maybe the range was wrong. Maybe the torpedoes missed. Maybe the magnetic exploders failed again. Then, at 0232, the first torpedo hit. The explosion was a white flash on the ammunition ship's starboard side. The second torpedo hit 3 seconds later, port side. The third torpedo hit the ship directly amidships. The ammunition ship's cargo detonated. The explosion was not nuclear, but it looked close. A fireball erupted from the ship's center. Flames shot 500 feet into the air. The blast wave rolled across the water. Fluckey felt it hit Barb's hull. The shock rattled the submarine. Men grabbed for handholds. The sound arrived a second later. Not a boom, a sustained roar that hurt to hear. The ammunition ship disintegrated. The hull split in half. Debris launched in every direction. Burning wreckage landed on nearby ships. One transport caught fire. The tanker's superstructure was crushed by falling debris. The fireball illuminated the entire harbor. Fluckey could see everything now. Japanese sailors abandoning ships, patrol boats starting their engines, coastal batteries traversing their guns, and he could see the channel they had to escape through. 15 miles of narrow water, now lit up like Nunadao. All ahead, full. Barb's diesels roared to maximum power. The submarine accelerated to 20 knots. The crew knew what was coming. Japanese guns would open fire any second. The coastal batteries would have perfect targets. Now. The harbor was illuminated by the burning ammunition ship. Every gun crew could see Barb clearly. A submarine on the surface was defenseless against artillery. The pressure hull was designed to withstand water pressure at depth, not explosive shells. The conning tower Fairwater had some armor plating, but only enough to stop small arms fire. A 6-inch artillery shell would penetrate the hull and detonate inside. The explosion would rupture ballast tanks, flood machinery spaces, kill crew members. If a shell hit the pressure hull below the waterline, the submarine would sink in minutes. The diving officer stood ready at his station. One word from Fluckey, and he would flood all ballast tanks. The submarine would crash dive in 60 seconds. But crash diving would kill them just as surely as the artillery fire. The water depth was 65 feet. Barb's keel would hit bottom at 48 feet. The impact would crack the pressure hull. Water would flood the boat through the damage. The submarine would settle on the bottom, with no way to surface. The crew would drown or suffocate as oxygen ran out. So Barb could not dive, could not submerge to safety, could only run on the surface and hope the Japanese gunners missed. The mathematics favored the Japanese. Multiple coastal batteries, unlimited ammunition, stationary firing positions. They could fire thousands of shells. Barb just had to get unlucky once. At 0234, the first coastal battery fired. The battery was positioned on the north headland. 3 6-inch guns, probably Type 3 naval guns removed from scrapped warships and mounted in concrete emplacements. Each gun fired a 100-pound shell. Muzzle velocity 2,800 feet per second. Maximum range 15 miles. At 14 miles range, the shells would arrive in 40 seconds. The first salvo landed 200 yards short. 3 water columns erupted ahead of Barb's bow. The gunners were finding the range. Standard naval gunnery procedure. Fire a salvo short. Observe the fall of shot. Adjust aim. Fire again. Each salvo got closer until the shells landed on target. Fluckey ordered hard right rudder. Barb swung toward the north shore. The helmsman spun the wheel. The submarine's rudder turned to maximum angle. Barb's bow came right. The second salvo landed where Barb had been 10 seconds earlier. 3 more water columns. Close enough that spray landed on the deck. The navigator called out ranges to the harbor entrance. 14 miles. Fluckey checked his watch. At 20 knots, Barb would reach the entrance in 42 minutes. 42 minutes of being shot at. 42 minutes of maneuvering at high speed through restricted waters in darkness. 42 minutes of praying the diesels did not break down. The engine room was pushing the diesels beyond rated capacity. The 4 General Motors engines had been designed for 1,350 horsepower each. Maximum continuous power. The chief engineer was running them at 1,425 horsepower. Overload conditions. The engine temperatures were climbing into red zones. Bearing temperatures exceeded normal operating limits. But the engines kept running. The chief knew his machinery. He knew how far he could push before something broke. The third coastal battery opened fire at 0236. This one was closer. The shells landed 100 yards astern, getting the range. The fourth salvo would hit. Fluckey ordered left rudder. Barb jinked back toward the south shore. Japanese searchlights swept the water. They found Barb at 0238. The submarine was pinned. White light everywhere. Every gun in the harbor could see them now. Fluckey ordered all ahead flank. The diesels screamed. Barb pushed past 20 knots, 21, 22. The submarine's maximum speed was supposed to be 20 knots. The engineers were making 22. Coastal guns fired continuously. Shells landed in Barb's wake. Some fell short. Some went long. None hit. The submarine was zigzagging, changing course every 30 seconds. The Japanese gunners couldn't track the target. At 0245, Barb passed through the narrowest part of the channel, 1 mile wide. Searchlights from both shores. Coastal batteries firing from 3 positions. The submarine raced between them. Shells bracketed the boat. One landed 50 yards to port. One landed 30 yards to starboard. Fluckey felt the pressure waves. Water columns rose higher than Barb's conning tower. The crew stayed at their stations. Nobody panicked. Nobody abandoned post. They had trained for this. Run the boat. Follow orders. Trust the skipper. At 0252, Barb cleared the narrows. The channel widened to 2 miles. The searchlights lost contact. The submarine disappeared into darkness. Coastal guns kept firing. Blind now. Shooting at where they thought Barb should be. All rounds missed. The navigator reported 8 miles to the harbor entrance. Fluckey ordered speed, reduced to 18 knots. Conserve fuel. The diesels had been running at maximum power for 18 minutes. The engine room reported temperatures climbing. Normal. Expected. the engines would hold. At 0310, Japanese patrol boats appeared astern. 3 vessels, fast, armed with depth charges and machine guns, range 2 miles and closing. Barb's deck guns could engage surface targets, but that meant slowing down, turning to bring guns to bear. The patrol boats were faster than Barb. If the submarine slowed, they would catch her. Fluckey ordered evasive maneuvers, hard right rudder, speed 20 knots. The submarine swung toward the south shore again. The patrol boats followed. But they were being cautious, afraid of running aground in the dark. Barb knew the channels. The patrol boats did not. At 0318, Barb entered the final approach to the harbor entrance. The headlands appeared ahead, dark silhouettes against the night sky. Range 3 miles. The patrol boats were still following. Range 1,500 yards. They opened fire with machine guns. Tracers arced across the water. Most fell short. A few rounds sparked off Barb's deck plating. No damage. The crew stayed below. The deck was empty except for the lookouts. They crouched behind the conning tower's armor. Machine gun fire couldn't penetrate. Barb crossed the harbor entrance at 0325. Open ocean ahead. Deep water. Safety. Fluckey ordered dive. The crew responded instantly. Lookouts cleared the bridge. Hatches slammed shut. Vents opened. Barb's ballast tanks flooded. The submarine's bow tilted down. She slipped beneath the surface at 0327. The patrol boats reached the harbor entrance at 0330. They found nothing. Just empty ocean. Barb was gone. The submarine leveled off at 150 feet, safe depth, deep water. Fluckey ordered speed reduced to 4 knots, silent running. The patrol boats were still searching above. Their propellers thrashed the water. Barb's sonarman tracked them. The patrol boats circled for 2 hours, dropping depth charges randomly. None came close. They were searching the wrong area. At 0530, the patrol boats gave up and returned to Nam Quan Harbor. Barb surfaced at 0600. Dawn was breaking. The crew gathered on deck. Every man accounted for. 0 casualties, 0 damage. Behind them, Nam Quan Harbor was still burning. The smoke column was visible for 20 miles. The ammunition ship was gone, completely destroyed. The nearby transport had sunk. The tanker was listing heavily, probably a total loss. Intelligence later confirmed that the explosion had been seen from 20 miles inland. Chinese resistance fighters reported the blast destroyed the entire anchorage area. Japanese salvage crews worked for weeks recovering wreckage. 3 ships sunk, 2 ships damaged beyond repair. 10,000 tons of shipping destroyed, ammunition stores lost, supply lines disrupted, and USS Barb sailed away untouched. Fluckey wrote the patrol report in his cabin. The action lasted 85 minutes from entering the channel to clearing the harbor. Distance traveled inside enemy waters, 30 miles round trip. Torpedoes fired, 6. Targets destroyed, 3 confirmed. Enemy response inadequate. The patrol report understated everything. What Fluckey had done violated every doctrine. Submarines did not enter harbors. They patrolled deep water. They attacked from safe positions. They avoided restricted waters. Fluckey ignored all of it. He identified a high-value target area. He developed a plan. He executed perfectly. The result was the most aggressive submarine attack of the Pacific War. But Nam Quan Harbor was not Fluckey's last innovation. USS Barb continued her 11th war patrol for 3 more weeks. On February 10th, Fluckey took Barb into Nam Quan Harbor. Different location, same tactics. Surface approach at night, penetrate inland waters, attack anchored shipping, escape before dawn. This time, Barb sank 4 ships. On Barb's 12th war patrol, Fluckey developed a new tactic: rockets. He mounted a 5-inch rocket launcher on Barb's deck, naval fire support rockets designed for amphibious assaults. Nobody had ever mounted rockets on a submarine. Fluckey saw no reason why it couldn't work. The launcher fired from the surface. Barb could stand off Japanese coastal installations and bombard them without exposing the boat to return fire. On June 22, 1945, Barb fired rockets at Japanese targets on the Karafuto coast. 12 rockets. All hits. Shore installations destroyed. Then on July 18, 1945, Fluckey took the attack inland. Literally, he landed a shore party from Barb. 8 submariners armed with explosives. They went ashore on the Japanese home island of Karafuto, found a railroad line, planted demolitions under the tracks, waited for a train. The train arrived at 0147. The explosives detonated. The train derailed. 16 cars destroyed. The shore party returned to Barb. 0 casualties. The only ground combat action on Japanese home territory conducted by U.S. forces during World War II. Eugene Fluckey became the most decorated submarine commander in American history. Medal of Honor for Barb's 8th War Patrol, 4 Navy Crosses, the Presidential Unit Citation, the Submarine Presidential Unit Citation with 2 stars. He survived the war, continued serving, retired as a Rear Admiral in 1972. Died in 2007 at age 93. USS Barb completed 12 war patrols, sank 17 ships totaling 96,628 tons, damaged 12 additional ships. The submarine survived the war undamaged. Decommissioned in 1954, sold to Italy in 1955 under the Military Assistance Program. Renamed Enrico Tazzoli. Served in the Italian Navy until 1973. Scrapped in 1975. The Nam Quan Harbor attack remains one of the most audacious submarine operations in naval history. No other submarine commander attempted anything comparable. Penetrating 15 miles into defended enemy waters, attacking on the surface, fighting through coastal artillery and searchlights, escaping through the same channel while under fire. The mathematics should have been impossible. The risk far exceeded any potential gain. One mistake meant losing the entire crew. Fluckey made 0 mistakes. He calculated the tides perfectly. He navigated the channel in darkness without charts. He positioned Barb for the optimal firing solution. He escaped before Japanese forces could respond effectively. Some historians argue Fluckey was reckless, that the Nam Quan Harbor attack was luck, not skill, that he risked his crew for a target that could have been hit from safer positions. Others say he was brilliant, that he identified a tactical opportunity, that he understood Japanese defensive weaknesses, that he exploited those weaknesses with precision. Both arguments miss the point. Fluckey was aggressive. Every action he took demonstrated that aggression. He did not wait for perfect conditions. He created conditions. He did not follow doctrine. He invented new tactics. He did not accept limitations. He pushed through them. The question is not whether Fluckey's aggression was justified. The question is whether that aggression achieved results. The answer is clear. 96,628 tons sunk. 12 war patrols completed. 80 men brought home alive. USS Barb never lost a crewman to enemy action. Not one. Fluckey's aggression came with absolute competence. He knew his boat. He knew his crew, he knew his weapons, and he knew the enemy. Japanese forces expected American submarines to follow predictable patterns. Attack from deep water, fire torpedoes from safe ranges, avoid restricted waters. Fluckey understood that predictability was a vulnerability. If the enemy knew what to expect, they could prepare. The solution was to do what the enemy would never expect. Enter their harbors, attack from impossible positions, escape through routes that should be death traps. The Japanese could not defend against tactics they did not anticipate. That insight made Fluckey's career. It also made him terrifying to enemy forces and to his own chain of command. Admirals did not know how to control him. They could not predict what he would do next. Rockets on a submarine, shore raids on Japanese territory, surface attacks inside harbors. Every patrol brought something new, but they could not argue with the results. Barb returned from every patrol. The crew stayed alive. The ships kept sinking. Commanders who achieve results earn latitude. Fluckey earned more latitude than anyone. He used it to prosecute the war with maximum violence. No hesitation, no restraint within the laws of war. Just continuous, relentless aggression. The crew followed because they trusted him. 80 men knew that their commander would bring them home. That trust was not blind faith. It was earned through competence. Every decision Fluckey made worked. Every calculation proved accurate. Every risk was measured. The crew saw this. They understood that their skipper was not gambling with their lives. He was leveraging their training. He was using their skills. He was maximizing their combat effectiveness. And they responded with absolute discipline. When Fluckey ordered Barb into Nam Quan Harbor, not one man refused. When searchlights found the submarine, not one man panicked. When coastal guns fired, not one man abandoned his station. That discipline made the impossible attacks work. The crew executed flawlessly because they had been trained to excellence. Fluckey demanded perfection. He got it. Modern submarine commanders study Fluckey's patrols. The tactics are still relevant, not the specifics. Modern submarines do not attack with deck guns and rockets. But the principles endure. Aggression creates opportunity. Innovation defeats predictable defenses. Competence enables risk. These lessons apply to warfare in any era. They also apply beyond military operations. Any competitive environment rewards the same characteristics. Identify opportunities others miss. Develop capabilities others lack. Execute with precision others cannot match. Fluckey demonstrated all three. He saw targets in defended harbors that other commanders ignored. He developed tactics that exploited Japanese weaknesses. He executed those tactics without error. The result was a combat record unmatched in American submarine warfare. Nam Quan Harbor was not the most important battle of World War II. It did not change the strategic situation. The war would have been won without those three ships sinking. But Nam Quan Harbor represents something that transcends strategic importance. It represents human excellence under pressure. 80 men sailed into darkness, 15 miles of enemy territory, shallow water, mines, coastal guns, searchlights, patrol boats. Every advantage belonged to the Japanese, but USS Barb surfaced in the middle of that harbor, fired 6 torpedoes, destroyed an ammunition ship, sank 3 vessels, and sailed away untouched. That achievement deserves remembering, not because it was strategically decisive, because it was humanly exceptional, because it showed what people can accomplish when they refuse to accept limitations. Fluckey looked at Nam Quan Harbor and saw a target. Other commanders saw a death trap. Fluckey was right. The measure of his rightness was simple. He came home. His crew came home. The target was destroyed. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about submarine commanders who sailed into harbors that should have been impossible. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Eugene Fluckey and the crew of USS Barb don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.